Welcome to the Clemson Insider. I'm Will Vandervoort as we welcome you back to our On the Beat series. And today we have here to my left, longtime Clemson beat writer Eric Boynton of the Spartanburg Herald-Journal. Eric, thanks for being here today, man. Glad to have you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, we're going to have fun. We always have fun with this guy. Talk a lot of football. This guy's been around the Clemson beat, 03, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you've been around a little bit longer than me.
It's been a while. I've been here through the whole slow building process up toward where they're at now. So.
And that's interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about that because, you know, me and you are one of the few guys that have experienced that. Larry Williams, also another guy, that we actually saw when Coach Bowden was here and as he was trying to build the program, and then when Dabo took over, and you actually are the one. He's the guy who's very famous for the question that everybody sees when Clemson plays this, the clip where somebody asks a question about Dabo. Do you what was the question exactly? Did
Dabo think that Clemson was taking a gamble on him because he didn't have any coordinator or head coach experience?
This is the guy. So when you see that clip on the scoreboard or our Clemson's Twitter, Clemson football's Twitter and all that, he's the guy who asked that question.
It seems to make the rounds every once in a while. Somebody will retweet it, but it's funny because he does. I don't remember it. I haven't gone back and listened, but they did edit it to where Dabo just says no, and then it cuts off, where he actually gave a full Dabo Sweeney-like answer, but they did a great job. They have such a great marketing team and social media team up there. So
of course, we always give you a hard time as soon as we see it. We all copy Eric on that, so everybody can see he's the guy that said it. But it's great. We have a good time with that. But going back to the original question, though, you spent a long time on this beat. You watched Coach Sweeney build this program. Just your thoughts as an outsider, kind of watching it grow to now to where it is, where it's a two-time national championship.
Right, yeah, it's been really remarkable. I mean, just to watch, and I can remember when, way back when Tommy Bowden was trying to get the West Zone built, and, maybe he'd joke about showing recruits a big pile of dirt that they took a picture of somewhere, go, it's coming, we're going to have these brand new facilities. But no, just to see the job Dabo's done it's not like it was an overnight fix, and what he's done with the recruiting and just the whole thing has just been pretty remarkable. And just kind of to see the way he's built it, the way he's gone about it, he's never really kind of strayed from his process or his vision, and it just kept getting better. And it's, nowhere really almost to go from this point. He's got it pretty much where he wants it. Now it's really all about kind of keeping the status quo. But it's been pretty remarkable to be kind of have a front row seat for it.
It has been, and just to experience the things we've been able to do. I know Dabo has several times, mentioned us, his regular beat guys. He's like, guys, I know you're glad to be kind of doing this. This beat's going to the Belt Bowl or the Russell Athletic Bowl.
Right, exactly.
He's not putting those bowls down, but he's just saying, hey, this is, covering a national championship game is a totally different experience than anything else.
Absolutely. And I can remember back, when we'd be excited as beat writers if we got a trip. Hopefully we'll get to Orlando for, like you said, the Russell Athletic Bowl. After an 8-win season, you're hoping to go there. So I always wanted to go someplace warm. I know we went to Nashville a couple of times, and that's always a fun trip. But no, it's just for us beat writers, and just like the fans enjoy it. It is just a bonus to be able to be covering one of the bigger sporting events in the country. They treat you so well there, and as Sweeney alluded to, you're staying in a little bit nicer hotel for the media is gathered there for the national championship or a playoff game, as opposed to if you're at a minor bowl off somewhere else. So it's been a crazy ride these last few years.
Yeah, I've actually talked to a couple of the guys on the Florida State beat who, just till recently, they were there. They were covering national championships all those years with Bobby Bowden and all that. And then, of course, they had a little run with Jimbo. And now all of a sudden, it's like, I was just talking to them last year when I was in Tallahassee. He's just like, it kind of stinks, because, it's just the program's not good anymore. They're barely making bowls that they do. And then it's kind of reverse about what we witnessed. And so I kind of like where we're at. We're kind of like going up.
Yeah, I like our way a lot better. I mean, because it's going to be, and everything cycles in and out. You never know what can happen. And just look at Florida State. Now, Clemson seems primed for an extended, run, obviously, with the recruiting classes they get coming in, as long as Sweeney remains at the helm. But you just never know. So I always try to enjoy these trips, and it's going to be tough, like you said, to be at Florida State. You're riding high, and you're covering national championship games, and all of a sudden you're barely making bowls or not in a bowl game at all. So it's you're right though. I'd rather kind of start at the bottom and work your way up to the top rather than be at the top and all of a sudden it's
you're back down at the bottom.
Yeah,
you're not even going to bowls.
Yeah, you're penthouse to outhouse now. It's tough.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dabo talked about the other day. It's kind of interesting you bring that up. And speaking of that, we bring it up because this week is a Syracuse week, and Clemson again coming off a big win against Texas A&M. They're primed. They're number one in the country. Primed. If you look at the schedule, Eric, they're primed to say, okay, until they get to the college football playoff, there's maybe not a challenge for them. So how do they approach this week with Syracuse? Because Syracuse has, they haven't taken them all the way to the outhouse, but they have knocked them off that penthouse before just a few years ago.
Right, and that's probably a good place on the schedule for Syracuse. The fact that they're coming off this A&M game, probably their toughest regular season opponent, and there could maybe be a little bit of a drop-off. There could be, maybe lose a little bit of that intensity this week. But Syracuse has to have their full attention. And I know the starting quarterback, well, Sweeney was asked today about what other than the starting quarterback being knocked out the last 2 years, what about Syracuse is giving you so much trouble? And Sweeney's answer was, they knocked their starting quarterback out the last 2 years.
What else do you want me to say?
What else do you want me to say? Exactly. But, and then obviously that had a lot to do with it. But Syracuse, for whatever reason, has played Clemson tough. They've got some decent talent. I was surprised that they got whipped as bad as they did at the hands of Maryland last week by over 40 points. I thought that was crazy, and you think that, hey, maybe that takes a little bit of the intensity out of Clemson's approach. But the one thing Sweeney's done, as you know, is he's just been fantastic at playing Clemson. It's a phrase he uses over and over and over again. And those guys don't seem to have the letdowns. They just seem to be ready to play every single week. So, I assume, again, the way Syracuse beat them a few years ago, one of the few teams that's other than Alabama that's beaten, I guess, Syracuse
is the last regular season loss Clemson's had.
Right. And only them in Pittsburgh, I guess, really beat them in the regular season.
Pittsburgh in 16 beat them.
Right.
But the last ACC loss was Syracuse 2 years ago. Right. The last regular season loss was Syracuse 2 years ago.
And I know Sweeney has a ton of respect for Dino Babers over at Syracuse, the Syracuse head coach as well. So, I think they'll be ready to go. I think, again, you use that loss. Hey, the last time we were in this building, we lost. It doesn't really matter that Kelly Bryant got knocked from the game, and they had our number last year, if not for Chase Bryce coming in and, of course, making that one big pass on fourth down to T. Higgins that everybody remembers. It was one of the biggest plays of the season. So I think Syracuse will have their full attention. And then, as you mentioned, after that, it's going to be a test to this coaching staff to keep these guys revved up when you have the Florida States of the world that are down. I'm not so sure that North Carolina State's near where they've been the last few years. They're younger at a lot of positions, don't have that experienced quarterback that they've had the last handful of years. So it's going to be a real challenge for the Clemson coaching staff, I think, to keep these guys, amped up week in, week out. Because as they always say, they're getting everybody's best shot, being the defending champs and the number one team in the country.
And they got a couple teams on the schedule. I look at, North Carolina, obviously, they start off the year with two big wins for them against South Carolina and Miami. So they're playing well, going to probably have some confidence when they play Clemson here in a few weeks. I would say that's going to be even though I think Clemson should win it and win it easily, but that's still a game where, at least from a coaching staff, you can say these guys are pretty good.
Yeah.
And then when you look at Boston College, who the start they've gotten off to with their running game and their with A.J. Dillon and their quarterback Brown, they got a chance to be pretty good too by the time the Clemson game rolls around. So
Absolutely.
There's a couple of teams there, and you mentioned NC State that I think that they can see, okay, we got to play good football if you're going to win the game, because if you don't play well enough, what happened against Pitt and what happened against Syracuse could happen.
Exactly.
Now, the interesting part about this football game, though, Eric, is for 3 straight years, a lot of people think about just 2 years, but for 3 straight years, Clemson's had their starting quarterback knocked out in the second quarter of all 3 of these games. Deshaun Watson was knocked out in the 2016 game. Though they won 54-0, I think they were up like 27 or 29-0 at the time when he got knocked out. They were already in control, but he still got knocked out of this game and didn't come back in the rest of the way. I think his was a shoulder injury. Of course, 2 years ago was Kelly Bryant. He ended up getting a concussion. And then, of course, last year was Trevor Lawrence, ended up with a neck strain. So, you got to think, if you're Clemson, like, okay, it can't happen again, right? Not 4 years in a row, right?
You'd think. The law of averages has to go the other way at some point.
Correct. So, to me, other than Trevor Lawrence getting knocked out of the game, what could Syracuse do to make this a ball game?
Well, I mean, to Clemson, you've always got to try to slow the pace down. Not that Clemson's going out there. We know that Syracuse likes to run tempo, but they haven't seemed to have run in tempo as much this year in the opening two ball games as they had in the past. But you just got to, you got to shorten the game as best you can when you're overmatched, as Syracuse will be against Clemson. I mean, Dungy was a heck of a quarterback. I know they were giving DeVito some credit over at the Clemson facilities today, but I don't think he's on Dungy's level. It seems like they had some solid playmakers, at running back and wide receiver the last few years too that could go out there and make plays. I just don't think this is the same or nearly as talented a Syracuse team this year. So it's just all about, you got to play mistake-free, just kind of some of the old cliches. You got to play mistake-free ball. I think you got to shorten the game. You got to have some extended drives out there and just try to keep that Clemson offense off the field. But the biggest thing is you can't give Clemson anything. They've got to play a really clean, really solid game, or you make a couple of mistakes, the next thing you know, that ball gets rolling with all that Clemson talent, you could be out of a game very quickly.
Yeah, and you mentioned it 2 years ago, I think Syracuse played the game of their life. They really did. And last year, I think they played their best overall game against Clemson. Even though they went on to finish 10-3 last year, I still thought that was their best overall game. They put everything they had in a win in that game. And just couldn't get it done, I think, because Clemson's talent took over after they said, okay, enough's enough. We're just going to run the ball. And that was the thing that stuck out to me. So when I look at this game, I look at the lines of scrimmage, and Clemson dominated it last year. I see no reason why they can't this year, even though they do have some very good defensive ends over at Syracuse.
Right.
But then I look at the flip side of it, where Syracuse has had an advantage, I thought, the last couple of years is their receivers against Clemson's secondary. I don't think that's no longer the case anymore. I think Clemson is more than equipped to handle those receivers, and if that's the case, I'm wondering if Syracuse can really have any consistency at all on offense.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. And we saw last week, just how good Clemson's secondary has become. It's really the strength of the team now, is that back seven as opposed to all those NFL guys that they had up front last year. And I think up front's still a work in progress, even with all the talent that they still have stepping in and now getting their opportunity. But, what they did to Texas A&M, I really thought it was going to be a barn burner last week.
I thought it was going to be a score. I thought it was going to be a high-scoring game.
I did too. I was really, really surprised at how well Clemson's defense did, and with Venables kind of having a three safety look a lot of the time, and then of course you got Isaiah Simmons at linebacker, who started his career as a safety.
Yeah, he played three safeties. He had three safeties, three linebackers, and three down linemen. That's a 3-3-3 if you go ahead and have
right,
it.
Exactly.
So it was and then he played man coverage on the outside with his corners. It was a very unique system that not one everybody sees. Just to have that many safeties out on the field at one time, where he's had sometimes four safeties and played one as a linebacker, which would be Simmons, kind of bouncing him around in that linebacker safety.
Exactly. So it's just tough to throw. Now they're not going to get the pass rush this year that they had last year with those,
right.
with the Lawrences and the Wilkins and stuff. But the way they are on the back end, and they Sweeney always likes to say they have four guys that they believe are starters at safety with Denzel and Nolan Turner, and the two regular starters in Muse and Kayvon Wallace. So it's it's just a tall order for Syracuse, like you said, to really maintain anything. And I think their best bet is to just try to just to maybe get something going in the running game, keep the clock going, and again just trying to play a clean game and trying to kind of shorten things up and see if they can control the ball a little bit and like I said, make it a shorter ball game.
Were you surprised that Maryland beat Syracuse the way they did last?
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised that they beat them, just the way they beat them.
I didn't see that coming at all. I really thought coming into the season, I kind of figured that Syracuse, just personnel-wise, was arguably the second best team in the ACC. I thought you could make that argument. There's a few others that you could include in that discussion, but I just felt, okay, this could be their year, even though they lost some key personnel, including Dungy at quarterback. But no, I didn't know a whole lot about Maryland going in, admittedly. But yeah, I thought it wouldn't have shocked me if they lost the ball game, but just to get throttled like that, I was really, really surprised.
All right, we'll just sum it up with this, or close it out really with this question. So knowing what you know now about this team, this Clemson team, and knowing they could still get better, but yet what's in front of them, do you think this team goes undefeated?
I would think so. Until they get to the play. Once you get to the playoff, anything can happen. But in the regular season, I just don't see anybody beating them. There's, again, with the powers that be, the regular powers in the ACC, the Florida States, it's going to be a while before they're good again, I think. It's, Virginia Tech is not what they were for a good stretch of years, where no matter what kind of personnel they had, they were always going to give you a tough fight. Again, I think NC State's a little down this year. And Syracuse, by what we saw transpire last week, may not be as good as everybody kind of thought they'd be coming in. And so North Carolina, kind of the surprise, a nice start to the season, but was still with a very young quarterback. I don't, again, I think that the biggest challenge is for Clemson to keep motivating themselves to put their best foot forward each week and to play with intensity and play with, a sense of urgency and a sense of purpose. Because I can't see really any even close ball games until, the ACC championship. There's always some pressure in that. You're going to be at a neutral field. You're going to be, seeing whoever emerges from that other division, and one of those teams could rise up and get it together as the season goes on. But I really just don't see a whole lot of challenge until we hit, late December and get into that the Final Four playoffs.
Coach Sweeney's been saying it all year long, leave no doubt. And I think that's the message with this team, because I think he understands for them to keep that number one ranking and to maybe play in Atlanta, because I think that's where, if he gets in the playoffs, that's where he's going to want to be. I know that's where we want to be, and that's where the Clemson fans want to be. Leave no doubt. In other words, go out there and dominate like they did Texas A&M. Leave no doubt. That way nobody can say, okay, well, Clemson played a weak schedule. Yeah, probably so. But look what they did to their schedule, and I think that's what you're going to see the rest of this year from this football team going forward.
Right. If you get down to the end, you can always have 5. It doesn't happen often because it's awful hard to go undefeated no matter what kind of schedule you're playing. But if you get to the end of the year and Clemson has a couple of clunkers where they, sneak by a team that they're favored to beat by 3 touchdowns and they win by 7, and there winds up being 5 undefeated teams, maybe 6 undefeated teams, and a couple from the SEC or a couple from another, obviously a Power 5 conference, it could come down to, well, wait a minute, now Clemson's going to get the benefit of the doubt, I think, more often than not.
If they're number one in the country, I think they'll get it.
Exactly. They've earned that. They won the championship last year. They've consistently been in the playoffs, so they're going to get that measure of respect. But still, you don't want any kind of an argument. You don't want it to go to the panel. You want to say, look, we won all our games convincingly the way we were expected to do. And like you said, leave no doubt, and there shouldn't even be a discussion.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to, and then if you keep that number one, you don't want anybody to leapfrog you. You want to be number one again, so you can go to Atlanta.
Exactly. Have
as
your
opposed
choice.
to having to go to Phoenix, which
Right.
is where the number 2, number 3 seeds.
Yeah, because it's, especially, and I know it's easier for the team to stay close by and everything else, but especially for mainly for the fans.
Yeah.
It's not like if you lose, you're going to be playing Miami or you're going to play somewhere that's not that far away. Phoenix is an expensive trip. You can't just load the family up in a car and head out to Phoenix. It's a long way to go.
Where were they last year? They were in Santa Clara, California. So Clemson fans, I'm sure, would love to save a little money.
Right. There's been several long trips out west during this playoff run. So it would be great for the Clemson fans for them to go ahead and, try to hold on to that number 1 seed and go ahead and play in that beautiful new stadium over there in Atlanta. It would just be, again, for number 1 for the fans, it would just be a great thing for them.
And it'll be great for us, too. So we'd be a little selfish on this. Anyway, Eric, thanks for joining us. For Will Vandervoort, for Eric Boynton, I'm Will Vandervoort. We'll see you next time on The Beat. Stay tuned to the Clemson Insider all week as we break down everything Clemson Syracuse and get you ready for Saturday's big game.